Kevin.
And so Wendy, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, you're gonna make me host? Okay, I'll start jibber jabbering until Donna makes me, I don't think she made me host.
Let's say I have the share screen button. Does that mean I'm host?
No, I'm still the host, and I have the way I have mine set up, everyone can share screen. So I'm
Okay.
but whoops.
I sort of want to do what your dog's doing, Donna.
Yeah. All right, you are the host. Go for it.
Okay, great. I got all the power then. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for the April RGovies meetup. Before you got on here, I was confessing to Donna that I tried to join the May meetup instead of today, so I was all I was all messed up. And speaking of things being messed up, my camera does not work on this computer, so I can't turn it on, and I apologize for that. So we have two speakers today. We have Kate and we have Nabil, and I forgot who was going first. Kate, were you going to go first, or?
On the agenda, or at least on the website, I think I'm second.
Oh, second. Okay, that's perfect. Right. So yeah, that's fine. I'm not very organized today, as you could tell, and so I wasn't prepared and didn't look at the website. So first we have Nabil, who is from the Congressional Budget Office, and he got kind of connected with us through Kevin, who's also on here, and he's been a huge supporter of RGovies, and so we're grateful for that. And I'm going to let Nabil, you could, if you don't mind, introduce yourself more to us, and go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Yes, I'm an economist at the Congressional Budget Office. My modeling started off back in mainframe days with SAS, and then when we moved to personal computers, SAS wasn't very good at that time, and I switched to Stata. But in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been increasingly using R. And so I'm just going to give you, and a big project that I've applied it to is studying the effects or estimating the effects of a potential policy to increase the federal minimum wage. So let me work on getting my screen shared with you. Okay, there. Share. I think you're seeing it. And see if I can make it. Okay. So CBO has produced several analyses of a potential policy to increase the federal minimum wage, where we estimate the effects on employment and on income through changes in earnings, profits, and prices, and on poverty rates, as well as on the federal budget. Yeah, that is the effect on the variety of income support programs. So over the years, this model has become larger and more elaborate, and R has helped me in 4 areas that I'm going to quickly talk about today. One is Shiny and ggplot for prototyping and interactive application, and then the R package framework for sharing code, and then the R package targets for managing the workflow of a complicated model, and the R package FIR to speed up the calculations of a model that might take very long otherwise. So first, let me just start with the end product. This is we're in the middle of updating the minimum wage interactive, which should come out this June or so. But let me show you last year's version. At least I think I can. Where are you? Oh, here you are. So the minimum wage interactive allows the user to choose among 160 some different policies. And the controls for sort of designing your own policy are on the left-hand side. And then various figures and a table at the end show the results for that policy. This interactive that you're looking at is a JavaScript application, in particular based on a D3 library that was developed by my colleague Casey LeBrac. And developing in D3 is relatively is more time intensive than doing it in Shiny and ggplot. So that's how I made this a little more practical. So well, first of all, let me just quickly show you that you can switch between the level of the minimum wage, say $13 or 14 or 15 or 10. You can decide what to do with the tip minimum, no change, half, the regular. You can vary the length of the phase-in period. It could phase in to 2025 or 2026 or 2027. And then you can change how it's indexed afterwards. And then for each of these, let me go back. And there's a headline policy, which was Raise the Wage Act of 2021 that was passed in the House. And one thing I want to point out to you is this light purple area reflects our uncertainty. It's a 2/3 uncertainty range around the estimate for what in this case, the employment effect would be. And that is one of the challenges in producing the estimates, which I'll get to a little later.
Hey, Nabil?
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you know, when you were changing the inputs, that was really cool the way you had it, the changes highlighted in yellow in the text.
Yes, this is a very this is a feature that Casey implemented in D3. I have not done that in Shiny. I don't know how to do that, but he was able to do it in JavaScript.
Yeah, I really like that because it, you know, sometimes it's you get kind of overwhelmed by the words and things, but kind of highlighting it there in yellow shows the effect of the change, or like where's that change happening in a really nice way.
Yes. So yeah, here's the effect on the reduction in the number of people in poverty, along with the uncertainty ranges, and then this shows the flows in and out of poverty, and then this shows the changes in real income and the distribution of those changes across people at different parts of the income distribution. Anyway, the point is there's quite a bit here that the model is producing. So let's see. Let's get back to this. Oops, is that right? No. Here we go. Yes, I have already pointed that out. Okay, so internally, this is what what I produced with Shiny. And let me take you, this is based on this is being shown by a Shiny server that was set up for inside of CBO for anybody at CBO to use. Obviously, anybody can look at this without having R installed on their machine. So this was a good way for me to share our plans for the interactive with management and my colleagues. And they could comment on both how the interface on the left-hand side worked in interacting with the user, as well as specifics about the visualizations that are being shown. Let's see, I think I can also show you that. Maybe not. Let's see, where is it? I just keep losing track of where I am. Okay, I've lost track, so I'm going to give up on that part. Yeah, so this just, so inside of CBO, that's the URL that would take people to the Shiny server. Again, my colleague Kristen Skinner built the server. She built it using a Debian Linux server, and she compiled the community version of Shiny to do this, and installed a standard set of packages, and has set it up in a way that, if this server becomes more popular, it would be easy for her to allocate more RAM and CPUs to the server. Locally, I developed the app, on my own desktop, and then just pushed it over to the Shiny server using an FTP-like application. There were some problems here because the version of R on my machine was, at least used to be, newer than the one that was on the server, and so some features like how RDS files are saved had changed over time, and I had to change them in an older format to get them to work on the server. And also the packages I installed on my desktop weren't necessarily the same as the ones on the server, and so I had to work with Kristen to get those in sync. But this internal server is also useful for other purposes. The server will also show any HTML file, and so I've now developed write most of my memos with R Markdown, and the book down support, so that it has the floating table of contents and automatically numbered tables and figures. And whereas early on, maybe there was some resistance to me, moving away from Word and sharing things this way, over time, I found that people actually like the features that they get with HTML and Markdown documents. Okay, the second way R helped was with sharing code. So sharing code is just one of the several ways that CBO tries to increase transparency around our models and our methods. And I chose to use the R package framework for sharing code. Why? Because installing an R package is very familiar to anybody, to most people, anybody who's used R. And the function level help that's available in a package, as well as the high level vignettes, are again very familiar and very useful. And so I had to learn a little bit about creating packages, but it wasn't that hard. Now, we didn't share all the code for the model, just a piece of it. And what piece? It was the piece that produces estimates for the labor demand elasticities, which of course is a key feature in generating the effects on employment, and then downstream effects on earnings and then income. Let me see if I can show you that package. Let's see. Oh, this is, well, let me go back to one other. So here's what a user would see. They would, first of all, I'll just remove the package. And then to install it is just the standard install packages command, except it's based on a tarball, which they can download from the CBO website, and which is itself inside a zip along with a README file. And to install is just a matter of calling that that command, and everything gets installed very quickly and easily. Now, besides the library is, we need dplyr to use this library, so that needs to be installed. And empalaster is the name of the package that we shared, and I give Kevin credit for that name. And so then at this point, it's very easy to use the standard help system. So for example, I mentioned that there were 160 some options. Well, to find out to learn about the option names, bring up the help, and it tells you, how the option names encodes the different levers that we have built in that I mentioned earlier, the level of the minimum wage, the phase-in period, what happens to the tip minimum, and indexing. Also, if you want to see the vignette, there are a couple of different ways you can get there. The browse vignette is one way. And so here's our vignette, along with that gets into quite a bit of detail about how these functions are constructed and sort of the economics behind why we're doing what we're doing. So again, the hope is that this is make this code more accessible to the people who want to learn about its use. Okay, let's see. Oops. Let me get back to here we are. And so here's an example of a function where I call the function employment elasticity, and it has two arguments: the size stats and target years, which in the name of the policy in this case is the minimum wage rises to $15 by 2025. The tip minimum is the same, and it's indexed to median wages. And by just calling this function, we see here the teenager and adult elasticities that would be used for calculating the employment effects. Here's a much weaker policy that only goes to $10 and delays that to 2027. And here, those are the elasticities, which you can see are smaller. I think I forgot to go over. These elasticities are based on, first of all, what the literature has found, the research literature, but also adjustments for how much bite the minimum wage policy has, how much time employers have to respond to the increase in cost, and whether that increase in cost will continue after the end of the phase-in period. And all of those things have an influence on the elasticities, and that's why it's high like that. Let's see, I want to just say a little bit about, building a package. First of all, to get that help file, you need to use these Roxygen comments at the top of the function definitions. Here, is the name, the title for the function, a little bit larger title, longer title, the various parameters that get that are passed to into the function, what the function returns, and examples. Should look familiar, because this is what gets compiled into the help system. And if you get into the habit of including these Roxygen comments at the top of one's code, then it's easy to build a package from the code once it has developed. And of course, vignettes are just R Markdown files like this one with a few little extra pieces in the YAML up front. And so that again is very familiar way of creating high-level documentation. Okay, let me pause. I don't want to, am I going too fast? Can I answer any questions people might have?
I think this is Wendy. I think I have one question. So when you create this vignette, does it also then, that's part of the, all that metadata or whatever you call it, that's on CRAN?
It's in the package, yes.
Okay.
And so, but it's we don't share ours on CRAN, but it is as soon as one installs the package. Let's see. I'll go to. So here is what. Here is the actual project that created the package, and I'll show you the file structure for the package is like this. The R folder is where all the functions are. The man folder is where oops, that's where the help. Oops, where did I go?
Yeah, that's like the man pages that they used to be on, or that's on Unix, or
Yeah, I think that's probably where it gets its
name.
Yes. Okay, the vignette comes from, where is the vignette?
I think I saw it.
Okay.
There's
Maybe.
a vignette folder, right?
There is a vignette folder, but that's oh, there it is. Yes. So there's the vignette. And so and then as part of building the package, it finds this file and knits it and then puts it into the right place, which I believe is over here. Or maybe somewhere else, maybe in the doc. I've forgotten already. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So do you plan on putting this on a CRAN, or?
No. Do you have a comment about that, Kevin?
So I'm just about to put into the chat the link to the URL that has the, there it goes now, that has the actual zip file with the tarball that has the entire package in it that you can install, like Nabil was showing. In terms of putting things on CRAN, I think the higher likelihood would be for us to release it on CBO's relatively new GitHub account. I don't know exactly off the top of my head what all of the requirements are for getting a package accepted onto CRAN, but I feel as if there are some hurdles that we're not yet familiar with. So, but perhaps one day. But I would, if I were to guess, like putting it up on our GitHub account would be the next logical step for CBO in terms of sharing that package.
Right. It's a very special purpose package. It doesn't have the general purpose nature of most CRAN packages. It's really about providing some transparency into what we produce in our reports.
It looks like Eli has a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Eli. Thank
Yeah,
you.
my question was actually just answered. It was about where you share this, and then you answered that probably on your GitHub account. That's how we've been now migrating in NOAA fisheries, posting things on our GitHub
Yes.
accounts.
And it's also available, directly from cbo.gov. So let me see if I can show you. I seem to have lost my. Oh, here we are. So this is where this is the at cbo.gov. There's a tab called Interactives, and if you click that, there are a variety of interactives, and one of them is how increasing the federal minimum wage could affect employment. And this is the interactive itself. But at the bottom of the interactive, there are links to related materials, including computer code on employment elasticities. And that inside of that is the package itself. Okay, let me, sorry.
Can I just ask a really quick question, kind of a dumb one, but you mentioned that you went from people wanting Word files to HTML, and it was quite good. And I'm kind of in the middle of that situation. And I just wondered if you had book down strategies for creating Word files, or did you skip that headache?
I've tried to create Word files directly out of our Markdown, but there are just so many disadvantages. It doesn't produce nice tables. It doesn't have the book down features of automatically numbering tables and figures and providing captions and all that. So my strategy is give people an HTML file and let Word will read those files just fine. It'll lose formatting, but if people want to provide bubble comments on your text or on things, they can do it by importing the HTML into Word and then adding their bubble comments. Inline comments would have to be manually moved back over to our Markdown. But bubble comments work, so it's good for internal documents and
Cool, thanks. And just to update that, I learned today, I think, or yesterday, that Word document 2 gives you the numbers and a couple of other benefits, but it's still, the tables are horrible and the figures are bad too. So anyway, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me just show you one more thing before giving up the podium, because I'm already over time. So I wanted to say, first of all, that the project is, let's see, it's a complicated project, and I've been using targets to help me manage the workflow. And just to show, and within targets, target is an R object. You might think of it as an intermediate result. And in this case, I have 13 input files, a large number of functions, a variety of, and targets will help me manage that by just keeping track of everything for me. And so, for example, I can, glimpse the relationship between the targets here using this this chart. So this is the model, and then and so you can see it's quite complicated. Over here is sort of the final result, but along the way there are a lot of things that come in, and targets helps me manage, keep track of that. Here are some of the input files on the far left. And then, if I want information about those targets, I can, there's a manifest command that, gives me information, including here's the name of the target, the code that produces it, how it's being saved in the file storage system, and a variety of other things. And so using targets along with version control has really helped me manage a very complicated model, and has allowed me to be, and there's a lot of emphasis in targets on reproducibility, and I can do, along with version control, I can reproduce last year's model very relatively easily. Yeah, one other quick thing. This is a large model. Well, let me go back to where am I? So I've been using, I use FIR to do, let me just say that to do one, to get those, to get the uncertainty range around, I ran this model 1,000 times for each of the 163 policy options. To do one policy option and one baseline is less than a minute, maybe 45 seconds. But to do all 163 options is about an hour and a half for one baseline. To do this for 1,000 times is 63 days. And so obviously, and so FIR came to the rescue to allow me to use a cloud machine with lots of CPU and lots of memory. And so I was able to reduce the time to estimate that huge model down to roughly 32 hours and $127. So anyway, that's the other thing I've learned about and it's helped me with. Okay, I will stop sharing because I think I've already stolen a lot of Kate's time.
Thank you, Nabil. Well, we're pretty loose on time anyway. If we need to, we could go till 4:30 if people still have time. But I don't want to impact too many people's afternoons. But that was fantastic. I learned a lot. I've never heard of targets before, and what I find interesting is how you started this and then learned a lot of things along the way, and how how R can help you and how you could get that out to the public and your colleagues is really fantastic. Is there anybody have questions? We've kind of asked some along the way, but questions or comments? I guess we had some things in the chat about targets. Oh, somebody asked what cloud computing, oh, Eli did. What cloud computing platform?
We use AWS C3 Central, which allows us to, each time that I log in the morning, I can choose, whether I'm using just a small machine because I'm just going to do word processing that day, or a larger machine because I can be doing modeling, or once or twice a year, the super large machine because I'm going to do something that's very, very, very intensive. That's a very nice feature of using cloud computing.
Yeah, no, the connection I was kind of making with what you were talking about was with the Evidence Act and how you could try to see what's the effect of various policies, and anyway, so I don't know if you want to comment on that, if that's part of the some of the goals, or anyway, it's just because
CBO's reason for existence is to estimate the effect of any particular legislative proposal on the federal budget, over the next 10 years, but also more generally in the long term on programs like Medicare and Social Security. And obviously we do have to bring evidence to bear to when we build these models. But CBO is also asked to sort of estimate the effect, not just on the federal budget, but on the private sector, and on state and local governments. And so our work on estimating the effects of of a potential increase in the federal minimum wage is in that area. How might this affect employers and state and local governments and so on, as well as people, of course.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Okay, thank you, Nabil. Any other questions? Okay, someone's jumping to another meeting. Okay, good. I mean, not good that he's leaving. Okay, well, thank you so much. And so we'll kind of switch gears a little bit and have Kate give a presentation. Now, Kate, I don't know whether your presentation will be particularly focused on R, but more on training in general, which so some of you have been kind of part of the interagency R users group for a couple years. So, which, kind of, that's sort of how our Govies came to be. And one of the things that the group has done was to focus on, sharing training, things like what we heard today from Nabil about, what are some of the accomplishments that are happening in the agencies, or, like shiny apps and those kinds of things, or issues that people have. So Kate is from Stat Canada, and I'll let her talk, introduce herself a little bit more. But she's going to talk about I guess it's international effort to kind of share training. And I don't want to say too much because I might mess it up. So I will let Kate take it from here. So go ahead, Kate. If you'd like to introduce yourself a bit more than I did, that would be great. I'm sure people would be interested.
Sure, thanks, Wendy. I'm just hoping that, can someone let me know if you see my screen? Zoom doesn't work on my work computer, so I'm using like my tablet, and it's not quite looking what I'm used to. So does everyone see my screen?
Yes, and I have the same issues, so no worries. Yes, I see the slides. Oh yeah, and they're full screen, so it's perfect.
All right, fantastic. So unfortunately, I can't see the chat or anything either. So I'll kind of do a spiel and then hopefully, take questions at the end. So as Wendy said, my name's Kate. I work for Statistics Canada. I'm also a project manager for a network called the High Level Group on the Modernization of Statistics. It's a network run out of the United Nations Economic Commission of Europe. And so I guess my little intro or background, I do have a background in economics. I made price indexes actually at Statistics Canada for almost 8 years, and I was a heavy SAS user. But I am now in, or have been for the last 2 years, in a change management role in the agency. And I am basically trying to bring open source to the mainstream at StatCan. And so this is how I got connected with Wendy. So predominantly focused on bringing R and Python to kind of the support within the agency in terms of governance, infrastructure, but also training. And so this is kind of where the training piece comes in. So what, my focus and my sort of main work at StatCan is we have 3,000 SAS users at the agency. So just a little note, I'm not too sure how familiar you are with official statistics in Canada, but all of our statistical, sort of official statistical products are made under one roof. They're all made under Statistics Canada. So we just had a census year. So I think we were like 6,000 to 7,000 people. But, so we have at least half, if not more than half of our agency using SAS. And really, we've been striving towards using open source because for a few different reasons, but namely, what our mandate is, how we are being pushed to modernize from our chief statistician. Really, we can't do it in SAS. So we need to leverage the technologies that R and Python have. But, everyone loves SAS. And so we have to train people on not just R and Python, but really a holistic, programming best practices. So that's kind of the frame of reference that, started this project. Now, we call it the HLG-MOS Meta Academy project because really it's an overarching view of, co-creating training for the modernization of statistics. Now I'll kind of go through, it seems the slides and the transition to my tablet didn't go so great, but hopefully you can all get the gist of it. So really this started that, my journey Stackhand's journey trying to go from SAS to R and Python is really very familiar to a lot of people in that HLG-MOS network. And so it was through this network that it became apparent, like, why are we all doing this alone? The whole purpose of the HLG-MOS was that we leverage international standards, knowledge, capabilities in order to help each other out. And so it was this idea that, we all have individual training, these data academies that are duplicating efforts, and there's no common standard. And it was funny, actually, how this project came about. It was a colleague of mine from the OECD, so the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. We were kind of having a conversation, and I was saying, well, I'm building Git training, and I need to translate this Git training into French because in Canada we have to offer all of our training in both French and English, or at least at Stackhand we do. And at the OECD, this colleague of mine was like, hey, I'm building Git training and I need to translate it into French. So it's like, well, why don't we do this together and reap the efficiencies? So really, I almost say we're trying to open source training. We're really trying to unleash that creation, that use, reuse at scale in order to evergreen training for the modernization of statistics. So, right now, there is a big push for things like R, Python, how to handle big data. But, the industry moves so fast that who knows what's going to come next. And we need to be able to move with it. So the project is really focusing on formal training. I think it is important to understand that there is a big picture of what training looks like. So this is focusing more on that formal training. And so kind of the premise of the project is, let's start by looking at what already exists, not just in what's being offered in the realm of, statistics, modernization of statistics, big data, data science, R, Python, et cetera, but also how these providers of training create and offer their training. So from a pedagogical point of view, how do they do this? We are then going to do, a deep dive, kind of look at what has worked, what has not worked, what do we want to take away from it as an international network. At the same time, we're going to use these lessons learned to experiment on the co-creation of Git training. And then out of this, we want to create a framework for that co-creation across international lines. The goals of the project, lots of members have different goals, but kind of here's the consensus of what the initial kind of expectations or hopes from the project has been. So share training resources, ideally free. There exists a lot of training out there, but you often have to pay for them. I think the big one is adaptable and evergreen. So the reuse of training. So if an agency builds training, how do you then take it and apply it to your own institution, your own agency, and then, modify it, and then again, make it available for others to use. The development of new training. So kind of along the lines of identifying gaps and how we can approach new training together, how to train better. So especially in a virtual world, we've learned that we can't just take, in-person training and put it on a screen. Tools for e-learning courses, a community of practice for creators of training. This certainly is a passion of mine, and I think is going to be needed for that evergreening of training. And then methods for assessing training needs. So again, for whatever comes next, how do you keep doing this? So how does this fit into, the our govies, our user groups? So we've identified so far needs for modernization, and we kind of lump them into three big categories based on approaches to virtual training. So the first one is how to build knowledge about a subject. So, here we're looking at modernizing statistical foundations, working with big data, data visualizations, web scraping, privacy and confidentiality. To teach a tool its software, so modern IT tools. So here the big ones were R, Python, and Git were actually the three big ones that were identified. Tools for e-learning development, kind of a separate tooling, tools for adaptive surveys. And then interestingly enough, there's also a need identified for project management and agile project management. So potential outputs, the goal of this is we're co-creating this framework. So we're identifying needs, identifying ways to leverage what already exists and the lessons learned. So the outputs are actually not quite concrete. The whole point is to carve this out throughout the year. So looking at potentially creating a skills assessment framework for national statistical offices, competency framework or guidelines on how to create one. Guidelines on virtual training is of course one of the big ones. Guidelines on co-creation, again, one of our main goals. And then lastly, identifying homes for any training that come out of this project and future work. So there are a few agencies, international organizations, so like the UN Big Data Group is a good example, that have already started accumulating a database of existing training. I believe Eurostat has as well. So trying to think about, okay, is there, let's not redo yet another database, and maybe there's a better way to leverage what exists. So how it'll be conducted. So we just started the project. It will take place between now and mid-November. And we're gonna have bi-weekly workshops, Mondays at 11 a.m. So hopefully accommodating West Coast of North America along with Europe as much as possible. It's going to be, because the project's rather open-ended and we're really trying to co-create this work together, it is going to be workshop style. So Jamboards, wikis. We have 23 participants so far. So 10 national statistical agencies and 3 international organizations. We are calling for participants. So I would not only want to present today to kind of share our experience and what we're trying to do to tackle training, but also if you are interested in participating, we are still looking for collaborators, particularly when it comes to co-creating our virtual Git and version control training. So why we think this is a really good subject to experiment on and to really push forward is because there doesn't exist a lot of training so far on Git. So there's a lot of material out there, but when you look at big data courses, data analytics, data science courses, Git is always kind of a tool that hangs around, but there's not a lot of virtual training. So there is already momentum on this training. So again, as I mentioned, this project idea started because both Statistics Canada and the OECD were developing training of our own. So we already have some lessons learned, some experience, some material. So we're hoping to hit the ground running. So if you're interested in joining us, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to answer any questions, if I can get into this mode, on either the project or StatCan's journey to make open source fully supported. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Kate. That was fantastic. I learn more every time you give the talk. Oh, and Eli asked if you could share the email in the chat, your email in the chat.
Absolutely, I'll put it in there.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I was part of the first workshop, and it was a lot of fun. We had I think a lot of great discussion and momentum and motivation going on. So I think it's a good idea. And I always love working internationally, so. Okay. So I know Brandon, my colleague, is on here. He developed a course in GitLab, I think.
It looks like Eli has a question first.
Okay, sorry, I always miss Eli's hand up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eli.
Hey, great to hear your talk. I'll be reaching out. I'm from NOAA Fisheries, and we're embarked on a lot of upskilling of our staff, our scientific staff across our entire agency in sort of all the things that you were listing. And yeah, it's been, so I've been teaching Git and GitHub. GitHub is the platform that we're basically have been adopting across our agency for delivery of tools and our version control. But also kind of doing project management there also. So like all those things you listed are things that we've been working on. And it's been interesting for me in teaching Git and GitHub across the agency. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of online stuff, but I think for our scientists, it was really helpful for them to be taught by somebody who does the same job that they do. And I mean, I know like the kind of computers they're on, I know what issues they're going to deal with IT. I know their background. Like a lot of the online stuff, it's taught by people coming from a computer science background, and you know, they love working at the terminal. And the people I'm training, that's not what they want to be doing. And that can sometimes like be, it's a kind of an interesting, it's not a conflict, but kind of maybe a miscommunication. I've been involved in hackathons that we're doing on sort of in environmental science and working with big data. And this is a team of people who are teaching in the hackathon, and we've got like IT people who are working, or people who their lives are revolving, let's put it that way. And, you know, when they want to teach Git to the participants, they want to do it at the command line. And, you know, I'll come in as a scientist and say, look, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're not going to engage people that way. Like that's going to be that's too hard of an entry for them. And if we use like a GUI, you know, that's going to be better. So anyhow, so that's been my experience. It's just really helpful to be taught by somebody who's similar to you.
So thank you for that experience. I do apologize. I got disconnected right at the beginning, but I think I got most of that. So I'm actually really interested to hear your experience. We've had a similar experience at Statistics Canada, and my team, we sort of strive to be that, you know, technology, IT for data analysts. So how do we turn this and make it consumable and approachable and usable by data analysts? So we do a lot of coaching and training and work with clients for that reason. So I'm glad to see that we're not out to lunch, that this is, other people have observed this. And also I think as much as I can say this because I work at a just national stats office, but we often think we're like extra special when really we have very similar needs to most other agencies. But that's where we often find that tweak for what like commercial offerings is that in the official stats setting, security, privacy, confidentiality, and sort of approaches on even things like, so an anecdotal experience when my price index days, we had a tool that came into StatCan a few years ago, Power BI, so a data visualization tool, and it was all the rage and everyone wanted to use it, but it simply was useless for price indexes, just the way that the program worked and the way that you analyze price indexes. So like, this is where, it is useful to bring in training and then make the tweaks that you need for your own agency. And that's what we're kind of hoping to establish, is that, let's open source training. So how you pull code from GitHub or even packages, and then you bring it in and you modify it to your own use. That's kind of my dream with this. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, thanks again for the presentation. And I wanted to echo a little bit of what Eli was saying. I'm in a similar situation where I've put together trainings for folks at CBO. I've struggled with, I think, exactly what you were saying, Eli, in terms of like, I probably made the mistake of teaching Git from the command line, but it was what I knew. And so that's what I knew how to teach. And I also had the struggle of like, we're in a situation where we're straddling between SVN and Git, where we've been using SVN for a decade or more, 15 years, and we learned that through a GUI and adopted that through a GUI. And for whatever reason, I learned it through, Git from the command line. And I haven't adopted a GUI to learn for myself and to teach to my colleagues at CBO. So I'm interested in hearing, one, if you have suggestions on that point, and in terms of like the effort that you're working through, Kate. I don't know how I can be of any help, but I'm happy to chat with you about what I've done and what I've learned. I took a lot of a lot of my teaching. I think I try to pick very liberally from the software carpentry's teachings and Greg Wilson's work. I'm a big fan of both of that. So that's where I usually rely on for my materials and formats and ideas for how to share things. So it's a great resource.
Thank you. That's actually really helpful. We are familiar with software carpentry. Some of us, the struggle we have is, again, every sort of training we have to provide also needs a French counterpart. So we kind of have to pick and choose. So we don't readily use software carpentry, but that's a good base resource. And I'm actually quite interested with the reception of Git training from the command line. I don't know if we want to turn this into a Git discussion, so maybe I'll follow up after, but we're struggling with that as well. Our Git training is from the command line as well. Most people seem receptive to it, but we have had the odd comment about like, why aren't you guys using the GUI? Like why are the command line? So I'm giving me some second thoughts now.
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten the feedback. It feels like we're like regressing in our computing environments when like having to go back to a command line. It feels as if everyone feels as if the GUI is the way forward, but it's modern, right? And that going back to the command line is a little bit regressing.
But at BLS we have Git GUI, Git Bash, GitHub Desktop, Tortoise Git, Eclipse, RStudio, all that have various like Git interfaces and Git, like what button do you click? Which is why, I chose to, when I taught taught it to our developers to teach it in Git Bash at the command line, because you learn the concepts, and those concepts all underlie those buttons that they're clicking. So I felt like it was the best way to kind of teach them the concepts. And then I sort of asked them to translate it into whatever, basically to Eli's point, translate it into whatever makes most sense for their narrow division, because their division tends to take on standards like whether they're using Eclipse or TortoiseGit or whatever. So translate those concepts into what button you click.
Yeah. So one thing that's like really influential.
Froze up.
But I direct people who are sort of doing the training is studying. I gave a talk on this a few weeks ago in RGovies about the diffusion of innovation theory. And there's like really helpful information about like your audience as like when you first introduce the idea and then trying to go mainstream. And like the first people you introduce it to, like, I mean, they just love new things, and any frustration that doesn't bother them. You know, like they go on to Git Bash and they destroy their repository, but that's fine. That doesn't deter them. They just dive in hours and hours, and they you know, oh, the documentation is terrible. Oh, they don't care. You know, they will overlook all sorts of terrible things. And we know these people, and probably many people on the call here are those people. But you have to keep in mind that as you start spreading this technology, these ideas into the broader group, those are not the people that you're facing. And they are really deterred by frustration and, you know, trashing their repository, not being able to figure it out, having to, you know, they go onto Google to try to figure out how to do something in Git, and they see 10 different options on Stack Overflow. This is not exciting for them like it is for those early people. This is extremely frustrating, and they throw up their hands and they don't want to do it. So like, that's been really, really, really helpful for me in thinking about how we tailor our training and understanding that the training is going to be tailored differently for different people. I think that's a great example of like teaching one group at the command line and then saying, and this GUI, right? That's an example of like tailoring to different audiences. So that's been like really like for me, for teaching, figuring out how to teach and reduce the frustration factor. That's been really key. Like for example, you know, I do teach a lot on GitHub desktop, though I try to learn as many interfaces as I can, just so that like whatever I'm thrown at, I can like hop on and show people how to interact with whatever interface they're using.
And I guess things change so much too. It's hard to keep up with it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I also think, you know, the concepts are what's important, because, you know, if GitHub Desktop or Git GUI moves a button, like somebody that only knows to click the button that's in that position is going to be kind of lost. But if they know, like, I need to write a commit message and click and commit it, I can go find out where that is in the interface. It has to be here somewhere because that's a fundamental part of Git. So, you know, they just have to figure out how to do it with the tools, but they need to know what they need to do.
Yep, that's a good point. All right. Well, that was a really wonderful conversation or discussion. Thank you. And I love how you worded that, Kate, that you're trying to open source training, you create open source training, which is, I'm all about open source. So I love that and training too. So it fits perfectly together. Okay, fantastic. Thank you everybody for coming and participating. It's been, this is my favorite, one of my favorite things. This and the interagency, our users group are my favorite meetings. And we have the May event already set up, so you should have gotten a meetup email about that. We're going to have Brian Monsell give us a primer on the seasonal adjustment package, and I think he was the author of it. So it should be pretty good. And share it with your colleagues too. So the more the merrier. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And we'll wrap it up. We'll see you next month. All right, take care. Sorry, I can't wave because I'm waving, but you can't see it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks.